Today, there is an idea people have almost stopped challenging. They simply repeat it. A natural human need has been turned into a psychological problem. If you feel miserable without close relationships, the problem is you. If you want a family, first learn to be alone. If you're willing to change your life for your partner, you're losing yourself. If you need someone close to you, you're dependent. And loneliness is called freedom. The most surprising thing is that this idea is repeated by followers of movements and ideologies that agree on almost nothing else. The wording is different, the explanations are different, but the conclusion is the same. Need no one, be self-sufficient. And almost no one asks anymore, why has the natural desire not to be alone, to have close relationships, to live with someone close to you, become almost a psychological problem? There was a time when the term codependency was used in a completely different sense. It emerged from work with the families of alcoholics and people with substance addictions. It referred to situations where a person literally stopped living their own life while trying to save someone else. It was a very specific problem, but then everything changed. In 1986, the book Codependent No More was published. The term quickly became popular. First, it was used for relationships with addicted people, then for toxic relationships, then for unhealthy attachment, and then for almost any strong desire to be close to the person you love. And even our everyday language began to change. You miss someone. You're dependent. You're having a hard time after a breakup. You have a problem. You want to save the relationship. You're afraid to be alone. In other words, a natural human need is increasingly being described with words that used to apply to completely different situations. The idea has long since moved beyond conversations about codependency. Some say, don't build your life around relationships. Others say, a strong person needs no one. Still others say, first learn to be happy alone. Then think about relationships. Need no one. Loneliness is natural. If you feel miserable alone, the problem is you. If you're willing to change your life for your partner, you're losing yourself. If you don't want to live alone, if you need someone close to you in order to live a full life, you're not self-sufficient. That's immaturity. And gradually, another substitution takes place. Loneliness starts being called freedom. And then it's sold as freedom. Loneliness is almost advertised as an ideal worth pursuing if you want to be truly free. But good, healthy relationships simply don't work that way. When two people start living together, they inevitably change their lives. Someone moves, someone changes jobs, someone gives up previous plans, someone takes on more of the responsibility for the children, and no one says he lost himself, or she's dependent. That's called a family. That's called a shared life. Any real relationship requires decisions a person would never make if they lived only for themselves. That's exactly why it's strange to hear that being willing to change your life for the person you're building a shared life with has suddenly become a sign of a psychological problem, or losing yourself, or sacrificing yourself for your partner. Today, we're constantly told about personal boundaries, but close relationships aren't built only on respecting boundaries. They require letting another person into places where, before, there was only you, into your time, your habits, your plans, and your decisions. Otherwise, a shared life simply isn't possible. This is a natural expression of closeness. A person stops living only for themselves and starts building a shared life. Not because they're weak, but because that's how close partner relationships work. You can live alone. You can be alone for some time. Sometimes it's the only possible way forward. After a painful breakup, after betrayal, after the death of someone close to you. Sometimes a person really does need time, but it's a completely different thing when loneliness starts being presented as an ideal. Because human beings are built differently. Good news becomes better when you have someone to share it with. A hard day is easier to get through when someone is waiting for you at home, Even silence feels different when there's someone beside you with whom you don't have to pretend. Friends matter. Children matter. Work you love matters too. But nothing can replace a relationship with the person you share your life with. It's a completely different level of trust, a different level of closeness, a different life. That's exactly why wanting to be close to the person you love is not weakness, not dependence, and not a psychological problem. It's one of the most natural human needs. In the end, we've reached a point where we're increasingly encouraged not to build relationships, but to give up on them more easily. Not to try to understand each other, not to get used to each other, not to learn how to live together, but to spot the next red flag in time. Not to think about how to save a relationship, but to ask, why do I even need one? And that is a real substitution, because relationships really can be very different. Sometimes they need to end. Sometimes the problem is us. Sometimes it's the other person. But seeing a problem in one specific relationship is one thing, and deciding in advance that the need for relationships itself is a problem is something completely different. This is how a person gradually gets used to seeing a shared life as a threat to themselves. Any compromise within a couple starts to feel like a loss. Any mutual need like weakness. Any need to take another person's feelings and interests into account becomes a restriction on your own freedom. Not everyone has a family. Not everyone has someone they love today. Life unfolds differently for everyone. There are periods when a person ends up alone. But loneliness as a circumstance is one thing. Loneliness as an ideal is something completely different. We're increasingly told that real maturity means needing no one. In other words, being self-sufficient. And if you feel miserable alone, if you need a partner, someone close to you with whom you can share your life, you're told to look for the cause only within yourself. But human beings need other human beings. Not because they're weak, not because they're immature, and not because they never learned to be alone, but because that's human nature. The ability to love, to trust, to build a shared life, to be needed, and to need another person. This is not a psychological problem. It's one of the finest expressions of what it means to be human. If someone has been convinced that relationships mean losing freedom, then no one needs to convince them to give up on relationships anymore. They'll do it themselves. If this was useful, subscribe. More coming on what science actually knows about our bodies and what we're rarely told.